everybody, it's Mel. Thank you so much for joining me today for an Australian book recommendations video. So as you may know, myself and 3 other amazing Australian booktubers are running the Australian readathon next month in July. I will link both my announcement video as well as the other hosts in the description below. So you can go to my announcement video, get all the information that you will need if you would like to participate in the readathon. And also, I highly recommend that you go and subscribe to my amazing co-hosts. As I said, they are all linked down below. So they are Meredith from Bin Chicken Books, Ren from The Reading Ren, and Steph from Novelty Corner. As I said, they're amazing Australian booktubers, wonderful people, great friends of mine, and I'm really excited to be running this second round of the Australian readathon with them. So there's 2 ways that you can participate in this readathon. One is basically just read a book by an Australian author in the month of July and you've participated. Or you can do our bingo board, which I'll pop up on the screen briefly for you here, and that has a bunch of different prompts, and you can read as many or as few books to fit the prompts as you would like or can, so double up, triple up, etc. The aim is to get people reading Australian literature, essentially. So the only real kind of rule is that you need to read a book or books by an Australian author. If you'd like to do the bingo board, then you will obviously need to read books by Australian authors that fulfill those prompts. But yeah, if you don't want to do the bingo board and you just want to read Australian books, you obviously can do that and you can participate in that way as well. There is a Discord that you can join to chat with us while we do the readathon, join our sprints, all that sort of thing. And I've linked everything that you need to know in the description below. Like I said, go to my announcement video to get all the relevant information. Today, I'm going to be recommending some Australian authors and their books that you might want to consider picking up. The hosts last year, myself included, put up some recommendations videos. So when you go and check out their channels, go and check those videos out as well if you would like some other recommendations, because obviously they read other books about that I haven't read. They'll know of different authors, all of that sort of thing. I also have one as well, so go check that out also. Steph has already done a recommendations video for this year as well, so I will link that below so you can go and get some more recommendations from her. And I think that Meredith and Ren will be doing some recommendation videos themselves as well. So keep an eye out for those. Obviously, like I said, we all read differently. So we'll have different recommendations. We may have similar recommendations as well, but we'll have different recommendations for you. So today I'm going to be recommending books, but more specifically I'll recommend authors and then tell you some of the books that they have written. So therefore I'm recommending books and authors, but I'm going to go through them with authors, if that makes sense. I'm not necessarily going to go into detail about how all of the different books will fit into the prompts for the bingo board, because otherwise we'll probably be here for quite a while. But just know that many of these books will fit into many of the different bingo boards, so prompts on the bingo board. So, you know, obviously have a look at those as you go through and think about what books you might want to read. But anyway, yes, so I'm going to go through some authors and talk about some of the books that they've written. I have got a few different kind of categories that I'm putting them into. They're not genre categories or anything like that. So what I've done is I've got a list of authors who I've read more than one book from them. I have got a list of authors who I have only read one book from, but that I would recommend as authors, and those books in particular. And then I have a list of a few different authors who are quite well known, but I don't think necessarily known as Australian authors. So I will talk about those as well. None of which I've read from before, but just to let you know that they exist and they're Australian. So if you're interested in any of them, because as I said, they're quite well known, then you would be able to pick that up in July. The first author that I want to talk to you about today is Ellie Money. Obviously, all of these authors are from Australia, so they are Australian authors, so they fit the very minimal requirement that you need to do to join this readathon. Like I said, I'm not going to go through all the different prompts, but I might mention a few as I go through. Anyway, so Ellie Money. Ellie Money is predominantly a crime fiction author. I've not read it, but some of her books that have become quite popular recently are None Shall Sleep. That's the first one, and then that series that goes with that one. Like I said, I've not read those, but I know that they've become quite popular here on BookTube recently. So based on the fact that I've read 4 other of her books, I would recommend this trilogy as well. I think it's a trilogy. I definitely plan to pick it up at some point. But the books that I've read from Ellie Money, the first one is The Killing Code. This is a murder mystery / spy novel. As you can see, the front cover, there's red on it, so it would fit for that prompt in the bingo board. It's not set in Australia, it's set in the US. It takes place during the Second World War in a boarding house / workhouse, for want of a better word, where women were employed as spy breakers for the Allied war effort. And we follow a group of women who work in this place, live in this place, and there's been a murder, or there's been a few murders, and the police are kind of not that the first one, the police don't really know what happened. And then the other one that is brought to this group's attention is of a black woman. And so the black woman who comes to them and talks to them about it knows that the police aren't going to care, really, because racism. So these women take it upon themselves to see if they can solve the crime using their code-breaking skills. There is some LGBTQIA+ rep within it. I think it's incredibly well written. I really, really enjoyed it. I think it's a lot of fun, really interesting. I like the characters, and I would definitely recommend. The other 3 books that I've read from Ellie Money are part of a trilogy, and that is the Every trilogy. So the first book is Every Breath. Then we have Every Word and Every Move. Some of these books will fit for multiple prompts. So the first book would fit for Red on the Cover as well, and set in Australia. This is a young adult mystery series, and it is a retelling of Sherlock Holmes. So we follow 2 main characters. One is Rachel Watts, who is like the John Watson character, or Dr. Watson, and we follow James Moriarty, who is the Sherlock Holmes type of character. They are teenagers, and Moriarty is very, very bright, much like Sherlock Holmes, quite socially inept, but incredibly bright. He is kind of very interested in forensics and science, and so he gets himself embroiled in different crimes and different things like that. And they become embroiled in the investigation of a murder that happens nearby. It's set in Melbourne, and yeah, like I said, it's really, really good. I really enjoyed it. And then the rest of the series follows those 2 with different mysteries and different storylines involving them and their kind of background and different things like that. And yeah, like I said, very well written, a really great retelling of Sherlock Holmes. If you enjoy young adult mystery thriller type books, you would really, really enjoy this series. If you like a good girl's guide to murder, then I would recommend picking up the Every series by Ellie Money. Ellie Money's written other books as well. That was my first author. Next up, we have Jane Harper. Jane Harper is another crime fiction writer. She writes more crime, murder mystery, police procedural type books. I think she's most well known for her Aaron Falk series. So the first one of those is The Dry, that was made into a movie starring Eric Bana, and the second one's actually been made into a movie recently as well. The first book is The Dry, and then we have Force of Nature, and then we have Exiles. I have read all 3. I really, really enjoyed all 3. I think Jane Harper is a great writer as well. Really great characters, just really well woven mysteries. Everything fitted together really nicely. The reveal was really good. All 3 books we follow Detective Aaron Falk. He actually works for the financial division of the Federal Police here in Australia. But in the first book, he comes back to his hometown. So he works in Melbourne, and he comes back to his hometown in the kind of bush of Victoria. His best friend has died, and also has been accused of, his best friend in high school, accused of killing his entire family. So when Aaron comes back into town, he used to work as a detective within a regular police force, but he doesn't do that anymore. But nonetheless, Luke, his best friend's parents, are convinced that this is not really what happened. There's more to the story. So they convince Aaron to stay around and try and figure out what's going on. Aaron makes makes contact with the local detective, and they kind of work together unofficially to figure out what's happened and what's going on. And then the other two books in the series are not about that specifically. They follow different mysteries, but Aaron Falk always is one of the people that are involved in figuring out what's going on in the mystery. So again, highly recommend. I've only read that trilogy, but she has written some other books, which I can't remember the names off the top of my head right now, but I will again put them on the screen so you can get an idea of what you could look into. Next up, we have Jessica Townsend. So Jessica Townsend, as far as I'm aware, has only written the one series, which is the Nevermore series, the Morrigan Crow series, which is a middle grade fantasy series. This has been very popular for the last few years on BookTube. I'd be very surprised if you hadn't heard of it before. The first book is Nevermore. There are currently 3 books out. There's a fourth one supposed to be coming sometime this year, I believe in October. If you haven't started this series yet, I would highly recommend. The first book is one of my most favourite, so you can use that for the prompt, but it is any of the series would work for that prompt as well. This is, a middle grade fantasy series. We follow Morrigan Crow, and in the first book, Morrigan Crow, she lives in this fantasy world, and in this fantasy world they believe that people who are born at a certain time of year are cursed children. They are responsible for like all the bad luck that happens in their kind of village or whatever, and when they are 11 they're cursed to die. And so Morrigan Crow grows up believing that this is the case, except that when her 11th birthday comes along, instead of dying, a man called Jupiter North appears and whisks her off to Nevermore, which is another magical world, which is kind of parallel world to the one she lives in. And she is enrolled in these trials in order to join this magical kind of like board, I guess. But yeah, it's a really fun series. It's really well done. It does deal with some heavier topics really, really well for young children, for middle grade age children, and I just really enjoy them. It's great for adults as well. Like I said, lots of fun. Just highly recommend. If you like Harry Potter, I think you'd really enjoy this series, and I would highly recommend that you pick it up. Next up, we have Garth Nix. Garth Nix, again, is an Australian fantasy author. Garth Nix has written multiple different series and books. I have read 2. Have I read 2 of his series? Yes, I've read 2 of his series. So he's probably most well known, certainly here on BookTube, for writing the Sabriel series. It was originally a trilogy, which was Sabriel, Lyriel, and Aborson, but it has become a more expansive story as well. So this is a fantasy series in which there are like lots of different necromancers and people who can get control of the dead, and the dead don't necessarily, they go to like purgatory, and like I said, they could be controlled. There are different levels of kind of purgatory. Within this magical world, there is one person who is called the Aborson, and they are a necromancer, but rather than being the evil necromancer that you would think of, they are responsible for keeping the dead in purgatory and keeping the dead dead. So that's kind of the law of the world. And the first book is about Sabriel. Sabriel is the daughter of the Aborson. In this world, there is a magical kingdom called the Old World, and then there is another kingdom which is kind of like our world, and there's technology, and there's like a wall between the two. As you get closer to the wall, all of the technology stops working because there is all this magic. So the two don't really kind of work together, but they know of each other's existence. And Sabriel is sent from the Old World by her father to go to boarding school in the non-magical side. But then he dies, and it's very mysterious, and she is suddenly kind of called to be the next Aborson, and she has to go to the Old World and solve what's going on, and yeah, solve some stuff and have some adventures and basically save the world. I really like this series. What I've only read the trilogy, the original trilogy. I do need to read the rest of the books at some point, but I highly recommend. I think Garth Nix is a really good author, and I really enjoy the story. I think it's a lot of fun. The other series that he has written is, I'm not sure what the series is called. Oh, Keys to the Kingdom series. So this is a middle grade series, and that it follows days of the week. So there's Mr. Monday and different things for each day of the week. I don't actually remember, to be perfectly honest, exactly what's going on in this series, because it's been quite a while since I read it. But I did really enjoy it. I had a lot of fun with it. I thought it was really magical and fun, middle grade fantasy feeling, and I definitely recommend Garth Nix as an author. and many of these books would fit into many of the prompts, I'm sure. So, like I said, I won't go into detail with that, but keep an eye out for those. Next up, we have Amberlynn Quay Molina. So Amberlynn Quay Molina is an Indigenous Australian author, so any book by her would fit into that prompt of reading a Indigenous or First Nations author. The series that I've read from Amberlynn Quay Molina is the Tribe series. So this is a dystopian fantasy type series. It is young adult. It is not said that it's set in Australia, but the description of where it's set is very much Australia. So it's kind of, dystopian future. The first book is The Interrogation of a Charlotte Wolf. We follow this tribe, and the tribe are a group of young people, so mostly teenagers, who have these abilities, and they're different kinds of abilities, like abilities to read minds, abilities to, like, amazing memory abilities, abilities to see the future, fly, all sorts of different things like that. But people with these abilities have been outlawed, effectively, or the abilities themselves have been outlawed. So these people of the tribe are outlaws, basically, and they are living outside the law, and there are detention centres all around the place where people who are caught who have these abilities are put into these detention centres. And in the first book, a Charlotte Wolf finds herself in this detention centre, and it is about her interrogation because she's the leader of one of the leaders of the tribe, and they are trying to, the government are trying to get more information about the tribe. There is quite a bit more going on than just that in the series. I thought that it was really interesting. I thought it was really well written. A lot of things happened that I wasn't expecting, which I really, really enjoyed. It's just really, really well written, really, really interesting, and I would highly recommend. I know that Amberlynn Quay Molina has also written another book called Catching Teller Crow with her brother, I believe. I haven't read that one, but I've heard good things. I'm not sure if she's written other things, but again, Google. Then we have Claire G. Coleman. Claire G. Coleman is another Indigenous First Nations Australian author. She's written a number of different books. I've read 2 of hers. The first book that I read of hers, I absolutely loved. It absolutely blew me away. I thought it was incredible. And that is Terra Nullius. The second book that I read of hers, which is Enclave, I didn't like as much. There were still things that I liked about it, and I thought it was interesting, but I just didn't think it was as compelling as Terra Nullius. They're not connected at all. They're just 2 books of hers I happen to have read. But Terra Nullius is a sci-fi, again, dystopian type book. There's a twist that will very much change your perspective that you've built up throughout the book when you get to it. Let me just tell you that. So it's very much dealing with colonialism, imperialism, and there's a lot of the storyline that's been taken from Australia's First Nations people's experience with white colonialism, which is very hard-hitting, but very well written and very interesting, and I think important to read. Terra Nullius was what Australia was deemed as, meaning no one lives here, despite the fact that there were demonstrably people living here when white men turned up. There's a lot in Australia's history that's very not good, to put it mildly, and this book does talk a lot about that. I highly recommend though. Really, really well written, really interesting. Like I said, I didn't like Enclave quite as much, but again, it is discussing different aspects of society to do with racism and homophobia and sexism, which is really interesting. I'm not going to go into any more detail about that one. Yeah, I still think it's worth a read, but I didn't love it as much. But anyway, Claire G. Coleman is an author that you might want to look into. Then we have Leanne Moratti. So Leanne Moratti writes kind of domestic thrillers. A lot of her books are things that have happened in the past that are affecting the current situation in a not necessarily good way, and people are trying to figure out what to do, I guess. Solve the mystery, figure out the secrets to help their current lives, that sort of thing. She's written a number of books. I have not read all of them, but I've read a few. The books that I've read are Big Little Lies, Truly Madly Guilty, What Alice Forgot, 9 Perfect Strangers, 3 Wishes, and I think I also read The Last Anniversary. So I've read quite a few of her books, and yeah, they're all that kind of domestic thriller type stories, all very different. I enjoyed all of them to a certain amount or another. My favourites of hers are The Husband's Secret, Big Little Lies and Truly Madly Guilty. I really, really like the way that they were written. I love the way she writes characters. I think she's really good at getting into the psychology of the way that different people think and the reasons why that they might make the decisions that they make. So if that's the kind of thing that you're interested in, I would highly recommend picking up some Leanne Moratti at some point in July, but just in general, of course, as well. All of these people, I would say the same. But yeah, I really enjoyed those 3 books in particular, but I've read her other books and some of her other books and enjoyed quite a few of those as well. Then we have Melissa Lucenko. Melissa Lucenko is another Indigenous First Nations Australian author. I have read a couple of books of hers. I think she's written quite a few. I'm not 100% sure. The first book I read of hers was a contemporary story, and the second one is contemporary with a little bit of magical realism, paranormal type stuff going on. So the first book I'm talking about is Mullumbimby, and then I've also read Too Much Lip by her. I did enjoy both of those books. I wouldn't say they are absolute favourites of mine, but I did enjoy them. I thought they were well written. They are dealing with colonialism again, dealing with the current situation for Australian Aboriginal people and the relationship that they have with their land, the relationship that they have or don't have with white society and white societal structures, police and so on, their relationship with family, all of that sort of thing, and definitely worth looking into her as an author and some of her books. Then we have Jun Winch, also an Australian Indigenous author, First Nations author. I think she's only written 1 full-length novel and then 1 short story. Not 100% sure if that's correct though, but those are what I've read of hers. So the full-length novel is called The Yield, and I can't remember what the other one is called, but I'll put it up on the screen so you can get an idea. Really enjoyed both of those. I really enjoyed Jun Winch's writing style. I think she has a really lovely writing style. Very almost poetic. The books are contemporary fiction, but they almost feel like literary fiction in the way that they're written, the sort of tone of the books. Again, similar to Melissa Lucenko, these books deal with Indigenous Australians, people's current situation within Australia, their relationship to the land, their relationship to white society and white people and structures of society, their own connection to family, all of those sorts of things. Like I said, I really love her writing style. I think she's a really amazing author. Definitely one to keep an eye on. And yeah, highly recommend her books. And then finally in this section of authors who I've read more than 1 book of is another Indigenous Australian author who is Lissa Brent. I have read a non-fiction by her and also 2 fiction books by her. She is a lawyer and she's incredibly intelligent and prolific within non-fiction writing as well. So the books that I've read of hers are Home, After Story, those are the 2 fictions, and I think it was called Finding Eliza, I'll put it on screen anyway, was the non-fiction. All of them were very well written, quite different, but still dealing, again, similar to Jun Winch and Melissa Lucenko, dealing with colonialism, with racism within Australia, with the current situation for Indigenous people. My favourite one of hers that I've read is After Story, and this one is about a mother and daughter who have had some tragedy in their lives in the past, and their connection between the 2 of them is not very strong, and the daughter wishes that it was stronger, and she invites her mother to go on a tour of the UK with her to go to all the different places that are connected to the literature that she loves, and it's about them trying to forge a connection via that, even though that's very specific to the daughter, but the mother is not really interested. But anyway, it's really well written. I really enjoyed that book. And next up, we have a bunch of different authors who I've read 1 book of theirs, but they have written other books, so I will recommend them as authors. I'm not going to go into as much detail about the books for these ones because I've been talking for a while and we'll be here forever. So the first one is Matthew Perry. Matthew Perry writes thrillers. The one that I've read of his is The Bluffs, and I'm hoping to pick up The Deep by him as well in July as part of the readathon for myself. So yeah, writes thrillers, so I'd recommend if that's the kind of thing that you're interested in. Then we have Katie McMahan. I read The Accident by her, and I'm hoping to pick up The Mistake by her at some point relatively soon as well, potentially in July also. I'm not sure if she's written anything else, those are the two I know that she's written. I wouldn't say, more like Leanne Moratti, more domestic thriller type of books, but I thought The Accident was really interesting and great. Also set in Tasmania, which is where I'm from, which is cool. Then we have Gary Lonesborough. Gary Lonesborough is another Indigenous Australian author. The book that I've read from him was The Boy from the Mish. That was actually the group book for last year, for round 1 of the Australian Readathon. Young adult contemporary fiction following a young Indigenous boy. Really enjoyed it. Thought it was really well done. LGBTQIA+ rep, which was great. And yeah, highly recommend. I'm not sure what else he's written, but I know that he's had a book either come out this year or coming out this year, so keep an eye out for that. Then we have Bruce Pasco. He is another Indigenous Australian author. I have read a non-fiction of his, which was Dark Emu, which is talking about effectively that we have said, white Australian people have said that the Indigenous Australians it was terra nullius, like I mentioned before, so there was nothing here. There was no people, but also they didn't use the land, they didn't cultivate, they didn't farm, etc. And his book is basically disproving that. Very good read, quite hard hitting, but very good read. I believe he's written some fiction books as well. I'm not certain, but as I said, potentially you could look into him as well. Then we have Kristoff Southerland. So I read House of Hollow by Kristoff Southerland last year for the Australian Readathon, and she has another book that's come out recently this year called The Invocations. She writes kind of horror, gothic type stories. I really enjoyed the House of Hollow that I read from her, and I'm looking forward to The Invocations, which I'm hoping to get through this month, but I'm not sure. We'll see. Then we have Craig Sylve. So Craig Sylve's written a bunch of different things which are kind of contemporary / literary. So the one book of his that I've read was Jasper Jones, and it is kind of a little bit of a mystery, kind of a little bit of a character exploration. And then he's also written Honeybee, and The Runt, which is a middle grade book. I think he's written some other books as well, I'm not sure. Then we have Sophie Gonzalez. So Sophie Gonzalez writes young adult contemporary queer fiction. I have read one book of hers, Only Mostly Devastated, but I've not read anything else. I quite liked Only Mostly Devastated, so if that's the kind of thing you're interested in, I would recommend looking up Sophie Gonzalez. Then we have Kate Morton. I read The Clockmaker's Daughter by Kate Morton. She's written quite a number of books, I believe one of which may have come out this year, Homecoming. She writes, I guess they border on contemporary and literary fiction. They are the kinds of books that are kind of domestic thriller type books again as well, generational sagas. I really enjoyed The Clockmaker's Daughter, like I said, so I'd recommend looking into any of her books. I think she is a great author, and I'm actually quite excited myself to read some more of her stuff. Next up is Hannah Kent. So Hannah Kent writes books that are set in other parts of the world, one in Ireland, one in Iceland, and they are, again, historical fiction / literary. I've only read, did I read Burial Rites of hers? I can't remember what I've read of hers, but I will put some of her books on screen. I quite enjoyed it. I didn't love it, but I quite enjoyed it. I thought it was quite interesting, so I would recommend her as well if that's the kind of thing you're interested in. Then we have Markus Zusak. So Markus Zusak is most well known for writing The Book Thief, which I absolutely love. This is a book set in the Second World War, and it is about a young girl who picks up a book when she's quite young, and she's being taken from her home to live with this other family, and then she kind of becomes the book thief because she finds books and steals them and reads them. But yeah, really good book, really interesting book, narrated by Death, which is something I really enjoyed. I won't go into a huge amount of detail like I've said, but definitely highly recommend The Book Thief. I think it's quite well known. It is historical, I guess magical realism, maybe a little bit literary as well. Really, really well written. He's written quite a few other things. I didn't get along with Bridge of Clay, which is the other book of his I've tried to read, but he's definitely quite well known and has written other things, so I definitely recommend him as an author to look into. Next up is Pip Williams. So Pip Williams wrote one of my favourite books of last year, I think, or maybe the year before, which is The Dictionary of Lost Words. This is a historical fiction feminist book about the writing and construction of the first Dictionary, which I absolutely loved. Thought it was incredibly well written, really enjoyed the characters, really loved the storyline and the feminism, and yeah, just thought it was great. She has also written another book called Bookbinder of Jericho, which I haven't read yet and I'm hoping to read during the Australian Readathon. Highly recommend if you like incredibly well written feminist historical fiction. And then the last of these authors who I have read from before, but just the one book, is Mark Brandy. So the book I've read from him is Wymera, and this was similar actually to The Dry in the sense that it was a murder mystery thriller that had different time shifts because there was something that happened in the past with these two boys, and then we're also in the present looking into what happened to one of the boys now that they've grown up, which I really enjoyed. I thought it was very well written. This is called Wymera. I know Mark Brandy has written other books as well, which again I'll put on screen. I actually don't know if he's written mostly that kind of book or if they're different books, but I would recommend looking into him. So that's that category. The final category, I only have 4, but like I said, I wanted to mention these 4 authors, even though I've not read from them myself, but they're quite popular. Some of them have been quite popular for a while. Some of them are getting more popular now, but I don't think that it's known that they're Australian. So I wanted to let you know that they are, if you wanted to read them or enjoy them. So the first of those is Darcy Coats. She writes horror and thriller suspense type mysteries. Then we have Lynette Non. So a couple of years ago, Lynette Non came out with the Prison Healer series, and it got a Fairy Loot edition, and it was very hyped up and did the rounds on booktube. Everyone was really into it, talking about it all the time. But she's written a few other books. She's written another series called Arcane, and yeah, I think she's quite well known as a really good young adult fantasy author, so I am also interested in checking her out, and I'd recommend if that's the kind of thing you're interested in. Then we have J. Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. So both of these authors are Australian. They write separately and together. They're probably most well known for the Aurora series, so Aurora Rising is the first one, I think. The Illuminae series. And then J. Kristoff wrote the Empire of the Vampire, and then also wrote, I can't remember what the series is called, but I'll put it on screen. So he's very well known, very popular here on booktube, talked about quite often, fantasy and sci-fi author, and along with Amy Kaufman, who he writes with as well. And then finally, a book that is quite popular in the last year or so, and I believe the second book in the series has come out recently and is quite popular as well, which is Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone, and that is a book written by Benjamin Stevenson, and apparently Benjamin Stevenson is also Australian. So if that's a book you'd be interested in picking up, it is, I think, supposed to be a comedic mystery thriller type book, then I would recommend looking into it. I'm quite intrigued and I want to pick it up at some point, but yeah, he's an Australian author, so you can pick up that book if you're interested, if you've heard about it and you wanted to pick it up in July and count it towards this readathon. So those are all the Australian authors that I wanted to talk to you about today. Like I said, my other co-hosts, which are Ren, Steph and Meredith, will be or have already put out some recommendations videos themselves, so go and check them out. Go and subscribe to their channels because they are amazing, wonderful people. We would love it if you would join the readathon, and the information that you'll need for that is down in the description below as well. But yeah, please comment below if you are interested in any of the books / authors I've discussed in this video. Let me know if you've read from any of them before, what you thought of them, and are you thinking of participating in the readathon? Comment all that down below. If you would like to leave me a comment but you don't know what, then leave me some kind of Australian animal emoji because we're talking about Australian authors and books. All of my social media details are listed in the description below, so if you'd like to go and follow me on any of those other platforms, please feel free to do so. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I would absolutely love it if you would subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up. And yeah, like I said, thank you so much for watching today. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time.